Hi, I'm going to show you how to make a Bristlebot, which is a tiny little robot that's mounted on the head of a toothbrush and uses a little tiny pager motor to propel itself. To make a Bristlebot, you need a few things. You need a pager motor. First of all, this is a little tiny electric motor with an offset weight on one side. It goes around, and the fact that the weight is lopsided makes it vibrate. This one has two wires coming out of the back, which you need. If it came from me, you'll have two wires coming out of the back as well. If you had to rob a broken mobile phone or a broken pager for it, you might not have two wires, and so you might have to solder on your own two wires, but that's how it looks. This one has blobs of glue on there just because the wires are weak. That little point where they connect to the motor is weak, and so I just put some hot glue on there just as a reinforcement. It looks ugly, but the point is to go. So you need that. You need a little tiny button cell. This is a 1.5 volt button cell. It doesn't really matter what the size or the shape of it is. The voltage matters a little bit. That motor is rated for 1.5 volts. And so 1.5 volts is what we should start with. You can abuse the motor a little bit, and I think the motors can take some abuse by putting on a 3-volt battery, which we might try later. It makes it go faster, but at first we'll try this because it makes it's an easier to get a more stable Bristlebot with that. You need a toothbrush like that. It can be any toothbrush head, but if it's got slanted bristles in one direction, that will work best because the vibrator motor is going to make this sucker march across the table like that. And if it has straight bristles, it'll tend to kind of spin, and it'll do other interesting things, but if you want it to go forward, a brush with slanted bristles like this one is right. And this will be the front. So if you like, when you get done, you can put, eyes and antennae on that if you want to make it look a little bit like an animal. You need something to hold it all together. The best thing to work with is double-sided foam tape. So, for example, like this. You can buy it in strips sometimes like this, and so if you've got a little kit from me, then you've got one of these strips in there just to give you a few pieces of foam tape to play with. And then last of all, a paper clip helps to offset the weight of the motor. These little motors that we got are quite powerful for pager motors, and they're pretty heavy. So our little Bristlebot design uses a paperclip to kind of offset the weight of that and to lower the center of gravity so that it doesn't tip quite so easily. If you find at the end that that it's still tipping more than you want to, you can try replacing a paperclip this size with something even bigger and heavier at the end. So let's start making a Bristlebot. To start with, you take the toothbrush and a piece of foam tape, and it's enough to take one about this size, a little tiny strip of foam tape, just about that big, and you can take the backing off of one side of it and put it on the top of the toothbrush. I would line it up right about with the front of the bristles of the toothbrush, so just like that. Center it on top of the toothbrush more or less. It's not critical. But do that, and actually don't do that yet. Don't put it all the way down. Before you even put that on, go back to your paper clip, straighten it out, and then make something like this, like a little V. Notice it's flat at the top. The exact shape of it isn't too important, but this I think works best. It is important to have about the same amount of paper clip on one side as you have on the other, just so that the Bristlebot doesn't become lopsided. So I got ahead of myself, but put this underneath there. You can rest it on the ground if you want. Make sure the angle doesn't matter that much. It can touch the ground or not at the moment. Just put it like that, and then press this thing down. And if it means that your feet come off the ground, that's fine. You actually don't want the feet to touch, ideally. You just want this to provide a sort of counterweight. Now we've still got the backing here on the top of the Bristlebot. So at this point we can take it off. Like that. and take your motor, and the motor, just like this foam tape, should line up with about the front of the bristles. It's possible to make them with the motor sticking way out front or right in the middle of the thing, but this is what I found works best. So you're going to put the motor here, just like that, roughly. And again, you want it centered if you can get it centered. If it's really off center, it might make your Bristlebot go one way and not the other. Now these two wires we're going to attach the battery to, and we're going to put the battery back on the back of the Bristlebot, but in this case I have not got quite enough sticky tape sticking on the bottom there to get my battery. So I'm going to pull off another piece of sticky tape and put it on, maybe cut it in half because I don't need lots. Tiny little piece of sticky tape, and I'm going to put it on the bottom there to hold the battery. Just so we've got sticky tape going all the way back, like that. And take one of the battery leads, the one that you want to go on the bottom, and just stick it right to the middle of that sticky tape, just like that. The other one is going to go on top of the battery. Now, then, take the battery and put it, again, roughly centered on the Bristlebot, because if you get too much weight on one side, it might run lopsided. Something like that, and press it down so that it touches that battery. It's making really nice contact underneath with the wire. I said the battery, I meant the wire. And then this one is going to go on top. Now, one thing you have to make sure of when you do this is that the wire, this other wire, touches only the top of that battery. You see, it's got a little ring there with a little tiny piece of rubber that separates this part of the battery from the top, from the bottom, and the sides. This is the negative terminal of the battery, and the bottom and the sides are the positive terminal. If a wire drapes over, if it either touches on this side, or if it drapes over the back, then it'll be touching the positive and the negative terminal of the battery at the same time, and all the current will go right from the one to the other, and drain your battery fast. It'll heat up the wire. It's probably not dangerous, but you don't want to do that. So keep this wire from touching the sides of the battery. Make it only touch the top, and you've got to figure out how to do that because it's your own Bristlebot. But I'm going to give you a hint. Sometimes it's nice to just take another piece of sticky tape, maybe small, and use it just like a bumper. Wherever you think that this wire might touch the sides, just put that in there. This stuff doesn't conduct electricity very well, so you don't have to worry about getting it in the way. Actually, that's a little bit too big. I want a very small, just a tiny little thing, just to keep that red wire, in my case, away from the sides of the battery. By the way, you pick whichever wire you want to go on the top and the bottom. It doesn't matter for purposes. It will actually reverse the direction of the motor depending on which way you get it connected, but for vibrations, that doesn't matter. Alright, so I'm going to take a little tiny piece of sticky tape and just use it as a bumper to keep this red wire away from the sides of the battery. So just sloppily put it on there, but look, it's stuck. So then this wire is going to go on the top. So now, once you've gotten that far, try it out. Press that down on the top of your battery, and this little vibrator motor should start. Let's see if it does. Oh, it's going to get away from me. Yep, see that? So we're just about done. The last thing we need is a little switch. So we're going to take another piece of foam tape, also maybe about 1/8 of an inch wide, something like 3 millimeters. Take off, or you don't, yeah. No, leave the backing on one side and take the backing off the other. And we're just going to put this across the battery in such a way that when we press it down, it'll stick to the battery and hold this wire in place, and that will turn our Bristlebot on. So there we've got our Bristlebot on, and when you want to turn it off, you just lift it up, and it takes the wire with it, like it's stuck to the wire. So you've made yourself a little simple switch. Yeah? Now straighten everything out. Make sure the legs are about the same length on both sides, that it's all roughly centered, and we'll just put it down here and give it a try. Woohoo! Oh wow. This is a very fast one. If you need to make it more stable, I found a couple things that help. One is you can replace this paperclip with something even heavier, like a bigger paperclip. You bend the feet with wires, for example. You can use a penny on the back. Sometimes you might have to move the motor a little bit forward, but a penny on the back gives it a sort of a counterweight to the motor. I like to put the penny sort of at a 45-degree angle, hanging off the back if you can. Use whatever sticky tape you need. You want to keep the weight low, so that's the important thing. So that's why a nice heavy paperclip that has, say, feet with the paperclip turned around into little spirals, that'll lower the center of gravity and make it more stable. Otherwise, just make sure everything's centered as well as you can, and run it on on a floor with as few obstructions as possible, and you'll see it go nice and far. I've got another video on this that just is the sort of experimenter's video. So once you've got this down and you've played with it for a while, and if you want to mess with it, there's a couple of other ideas about how to make it go a little bit differently in the second video. So there you go, and I hope you have fun making your own Bristlebot.